Vampire the Masquerade Shadows of New York is a visual novel developed by Draw Distance and released in 2020 as a standalone expansion to their previous visual novel Coteries of New York. It's based on the tabletop role-playing game Vampire the Masquerade and follows on from the previous game. This time, however, we're following Julia of the vampire clan Lasombra, a former investigative journalist. She's tasked with investigating the death of the Anarch movement's leader, and throughout the game, the player is given a wide variety of choice to choose which side missions to pursue, and Julia's actions can make the ending branch out in different ways. If you've not seen my previous video on Coteries of New York, then I'd recommend going there first, as this game's quite a direct sequel and builds on the previous story. We'll probably encroach on some spoiler territory for the previous game as we go further in. Like the previous game, the setting's that of New York in the world of darkness, a dark gothic punk rendition of the real world where things that go bump in the night pull strings behind the scenes, and anything that can hurt humanity will hurt humanity. Vampires exist, werewolves exist, and essentially anything you could think of that we're scared of exists. This game's set several months after the events of the previous, and external points of note is that Clan Lasombra have just left the Sabbat faction and joined with its previous enemy, the Camarilla. Now, in the previous game, we didn't really touch on the Lasombra or the Sabbat. Now, the Lasombra are quite a shadowy, secretive clan that I suppose sometimes get mischaracterised as dark Ventru. They've got similar abilities and control over shadows. The Sabbat are a faction that didn't get touched on in the previous game, but they're essentially the evil vampires, if you put it very simply. They believe that the oldest of the vampires are still sleeping somewhere, and when they wake up, they're going to be hungry, and when vampires get very old, they can only feed off other vampires for sustenance. The Sabbat are concerned with wiping them out, and they don't really care for the Masquerade or the traditions of the Camarilla, and in previous editions, essentially the Camarilla would be the good guys, and the Sabbat would be the bad guys, though everyone's quite evil in this setting, I'd say. Graphics are mostly the same as the previous, with a new variety of scenes and some old scenes returning. Most, if not all, the character arts have changed, reflecting time's impact on the characters, and this for the most part is positive, though it's dealer's choice on preference. I didn't like a few of the character changes, such as Kadir's new haircut, but didn't mind Tamika and Hope's new looks. The UI and sound, again, are very serviceable. It's a visual novel. It doesn't feel entirely like a visual novel. It's very good and can be quite cinematic book at times, I'd say. Most of the game shows this sort of oil painting style of background and character design, though a lot of the scenes have this really eerie, ethereal look to them, which I think's really aesthetic. Unlike the first game, we're given a named protagonist with a much more detailed background and ingrained personality traits. I like this a lot. I found the PCs in the previous game to be quite hollow, but Julia as a character is brimming with personality. We play as Julia Sawinski, an ex-investigative journalist who's fired after an investigation into the company Double Spiral, a company that was prominent in the previous game and is run by vampires. On her route home, she's attacked by Lasombra and tested. If successful, Julia's embraced into the clan, or if she fucks it up and acts a bit soft, then it's game over in record time. After her embrace, we have a few years time skip, and we're not playing a neonate this time around. Instead, Julia's a representative of Lasombra in NYC. Under the supervision of the sheriff, she has very little sway really with her peers, and it's more of a false position rather than one of any merit. And the Lasombra only recently joined the Camarilla, and so people don't really trust them. She's almost there as a sort of hostage or ward to the prince, mainly just to stay out of trouble and hold up appearances. When the ex-baron of the Anarchs, Boss Callahan, is found dead, Julia is used as a neutral party to investigate the murder. At the crime scene, she finds the names of previous characters' coterie members, Agathon, Hope, D'Angelo, and Tamika, and that's the setup really. I think it's a good start. It's a different setup, yet still reminiscent of something you'd see on the tabletop, and it's a nice bit of variety, not only to be a Lasombra, but also to be a freshly turned neonate. You kind of know the higher ups are trying to fuck you over and they've just got you investigating this so that you don't really find anything, but they kind of doubt Julia's abilities throughout the game. Clan Lasombra have a power we've not seen before in that of Oblivion, or Obtenebration if you're an old head, the manipulation of shadows and staring into the void. Julia can be quite stealthy and can talk to spirits, and it adds a lovely dimension to the game and a bit of mystery. It's something we've not seen in other characters. The game's definitely a bit tighter than the previous. We're funneled down some story missions but have a wide choice of side ones we can choose from. Something to mention is that Julia lives with her human lover Dakota, and aside from being a cutesy girlfriend, Dakota does Julia's makeup. As a Lasombra, she can't see her own reflection or use technology, so this comes in handy. Julia goes through each name in turn from the investigation, looking into our previous coterie mates. In Agathon, she finds his hidden diary, which reveals hints towards a larger conspiracy around Callahan's death. We get a better look into the thought process behind one of the more secretive clans in that of the Tremere, and their High Regent Aisling's actions. It's all quite interesting. For a character I never really gave much of a look at, Agathon's really strong in this game. Our second name on the list, Hope, has taken over and reformed Double Spiral, resolving her questline in the first game. She points us in the direction of her sire, one Carter Vanderweyden, a very business-focused Malkavian and a fun addition to the game. He's an information broker and screams American Psycho. He's very business formal, but a few times we do get to see his mask slip. And he's a very fun character. You'd be quite easy to confuse him for a Ventru. When it comes to Tamika, we help her dispatch some Second Inquisition officers, hunters who know of the vampire's existence, may or may not be funded by the government, and are a huge problem in the setting, as they can operate in daytime and strike with ruthless precision. After this, her story expands further on the Anarchs, and talk really helps you build a full picture of what's going on in the city. D'Angelo in this instalment, once a former gumshoe, is a bit of a broken man after the resolution of the Coteries of New York. He provides the leads we need to investigate our case, and his development, while sad, was quite nice. He did definitely end up worse for the wear after the first game, but his blunt humour does still shine through, and he does add a bit of a dimension to this. The whole adventure is a great jaunt into a high-level conspiracy within the Camarilla, something quite commonplace in the setting, and depending on our actions in-game and how Lasombra-like we act determines how we deal with the information we uncover, potentially blowing the case wide open entirely or deciding to turn our back on the truth. I found the whole thing to be quite fun. The story is a lot stronger in this instalment, and Julia's introspective scenes were a personal highlight and something I enjoyed, with the developers giving us a more fleshed out perspective character. The endings stand strong in their own merit regardless of which route you go, though the good ending is a personal favourite of mine, causing Julia to succumb to her clan's darker nature. Overall, I actually preferred this one to the previous game. Coteries of New York was a good introduction to the setting and the city, though Shadows of New York, while it was slightly tighter, I believe they went with more quality over quantity this time around, and I'm here for it. It was nice to see how the other characters in the story developed since the last game, and overall the narrative and the more darker design choices were a breath of fresh air. I'd give this one a fat 8 out of 10 and just fully recommend it to anyone either interested in a dark visual novel with quite a good story, some crime thriller themes, or any fans of the World of Darkness looking for an intricately woven story in the Vampire the Masquerade universe. Over and out, Smooth Brains.